Hello, welcome everybody to Bookstore Romance Day 2. This is very exciting. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Candice Huber. I'm the owner of Tubby and Coo's Mid-City Bookshop in New Orleans, and I'll be your moderator today for the High Stakes, High Emotions panel. And I'm excited because our store is genre focused, so we do sci-fi, fantasy, and romance, and I'm really excited to be the moderator today. I know I've said that multiple times, but I just am. So some housekeeping stuff first. Feel free to type comments into the group chat as we go along. We love to see people talking. And if you have questions to submit for the panelists, there's an ask a question function at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to ask questions. Please use that instead of typing it into the chat. It's a little bit easier for us. And of course, you can buy books by hitting that nice little buy books button at the bottom of the screen. And so on to the panel. Hooray. Today, I am talking with Sharon Lynn Fisher, who is the author of The Warrior Poet, which will be the newest book out October the 12th. Everina Maxwell is the author of Winter's Orbit, which is a good selling book in our store, at least. Jessie Mihalik, who is the author of the Consortium Rebellion series, also sells well, which started with Polaris Rising. And Elizabeth Lim is the author of Six Crimson Cranes, which just came out, I think, about a month ago. So hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here with y'all. So let's start with introductions. So why don't you tell all of our viewers a little bit about yourselves and maybe something that might be surprising to them or something that's fun that's not in your bio.
So I go first?
Okay, sure.
My name is Sharon Lynn Fisher. As you know, I've written science fiction romance for Tor Books. I have an erotic anthology with Penguin Random House Love Swept. That's a mouthful. And my newest series is The Fairy Rehistory, being published by Blackstone. That's historical fantasy romance. I live in the Pacific Northwest, close to Seattle. Maybe this is a fun fact. I live on a little farm. We have some goats and chickens and a little bit of woods. And I love to be out in the woods looking at tiny little mushrooms and taking pictures for my Instagram feed. So.
Okay, I'll go. Hi, I'm Jessie Mihalik. I write the Consortium Rebellion series, Badass Space Princesses. It's science fiction romance. I also write the Rogue Queen series, which is a reluctant queen who goes to rescue an enemy emperor. And then coming up in February, my new series starts with a badass female bounty hunter who takes a job from her mortal enemy. And then, you see how it goes from there. So fun fact about me, I am a huge introvert. So this is like a thing for me. And it's so bad that I actually wrote down the names of all of my books and my main character names so that when I forget them, I can look down at the piece of paper and be like, oh yeah, that's who I'm talking about. So.
Yeah, this is a good tip. I'll take next. I only haven't done that because I only have one book. So I thought, what's the odds of me forgetting that? It turns out quite high. So my name is Everina Maxwell. My first book came out in February. It's a queer sci-fi romance about two princes in an arranged marriage. One of them is an extroverted golden retriever type, well-intentioned, never stops talking. And the other one is a quiet, introverted scholar who just wants to do his duty. And together they have to solve a murder and stop their planets going to war. And the title of the book is Winter's Orbit, so I haven't forgotten it. Fun fact about me, I tried to think of this 3 minutes ago and came to the conclusion there wasn't anything fun, but I do play the violin, which is something that is not in my author bio. So that's me.
And hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth Lim. I've written Six Crimson Cranes is my newest book, and it's my fifth book. It's a fairy tale reimagining of the Hans Christian Andersen tale, The Wild Swans, which is about a princess whose six brothers are turned into swans. But in my reimagining, they are turned into cranes. And there's some blending with East Asian mythology. So I live in New York, but I'm currently in California visiting my parents. So this is my parents' house. And a fun fact about me, I actually was a composer before becoming an author. So I did not play violin, but I played the piano and I wrote a lot of music.
So cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's super fun. See, this is why I love that, to just be like fun facts, because now we have a violinist and a composer on this panel, which is awesome. And introverts like me too. I'm gregarious because I'm passionate about books, but I am also a pretty heavy introvert, as are a lot of book people that I know. So let's start with talking about stakes, since this is a stakes and emotions panel. So how, like, as your plots are moving along, how do you go about increasing the stakes? And to kind of go along with that, do y'all plot things out? Are you plotters, or are you pantsers figuring it out as you go along? And let's start with Elizabeth, since you went last time.
I'm mostly a plotter. I would say that I write a pretty detailed outline before I start doing any heavy writing, but I leave it pretty open. So if I don't follow the outline, that's totally okay. But I think for me, it just helps me get a sense of the stakes and what my protagonist is fighting for, what's important to her, and what she'll do to keep from losing it.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I think as I've talked to quite a few authors who kind of started and then wrote a few books and got more into the plotting side from being on the pantsing, like flying by the seat of your pants side, because if you get in trouble, it helps to have something to grab at. So I do now plot more than I used to. There's definitely a structure in my head of, at the climax, you want what the character is most scared of to happen. So everything leading up to that is not only kind of lesser than that, but also it's got to be in this kind of same lane as that. Like if things are happening off at random, they may not belong in the book. So yeah, it's mainly kind of figuring out what that end goal is and then kind of slowly leading up to it. Jessie.
Yeah, I'm a plantser, so I'm half pantser, half plotter. I do not do outlines. It just kills my creativity. So I generally, when I start, I know the opening scene, and I generally know like the midpoint of the book. And as I'm writing, then I'll figure out the end. So I have kind of an idea of plot, but it's all sort of in my head and not written down anywhere, because I've tried. I would love to be a plotter. I feel like that would, help write the book faster, but for me, it does not work. And so, yeah, it's right to that midpoint, build stakes, make sure that things are going well, and then they're going poorly, and then they're going really, really poorly, and then build back up. So my books tend to follow kind of a rough 3-act outline. So, it builds and falls. So that's how I generally do stakes.
So I think we're kind of all in the same boat. I would consider myself to be like a recovering pantser, because I used to just fully pants everything, and I could not stay engaged with the work if I looked ahead very far. But since actually getting book contracts and the agents and things, they kind of want to know, like, if you haven't finished a book yet, like what it's going to be about. So especially if you're trying to sell a series, or even just trying to pitch to your agent, I have this idea. So for me, I also can't write outlines unless I'm in really bad trouble. I do that when I'm desperate, like I can't figure out the way forward, and I'll just do like one like line, points in an outline. But what really has been working for me is I start with an opening scene too, and I usually have a general idea where I'm going, and then I write a back of the book blurb. Like, I'm not a person who like hates blurbs. I know a lot of authors do, but I'll write like that 3 or 4 paragraph, general synopsis, and that helps to keep me on the right track. And I don't have to stick to it, but it gives me something to not be in abject terror when I get stuck. So.
Yeah, I think the back of the book blurb is really helpful because it helps you figure out like what you're excited about the book.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've got that kind of, I found even when I've gone off track, like quite far into the book, I can look back at the blurb and say, okay, this is what I was excited about. So why am I not dealing with that at the end? Why have I gone sort of 90 degrees to the side? And I found that's helped quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that as well, because generally the back of the book blurb doesn't give away the ending. and I don't know the ending. So I can just be like, oh yes, all of this exciting stuff happens, and then the end when I get there.
Jessie, I found it interesting what you said about the middle. I've never heard that before, because I know lots of people, me included, like in the middle of the book, sometimes I just get depressed for like 2 weeks because I'm, I mean, I know that's pretty common, but I've heard anybody say that they know the middle when they start. I think that's really interesting. Do you have any, like, do you know why you started doing that? Or
it's less middle and more a turning point, kind of. So okay. It's a conflict point. So I still get the middle doldrums where I'm like, what am I doing? How are words?
Why am I a writer?
So yeah, exactly. Why did I not just stay a software developer? Like, why am I doing this to myself? So I still do get the middle doldrums, but it's generally a turning point that happens somewhere in there that's more what I know about than the actual like literal middle of the book.
I see. Cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely with Jessie there. I use midpoints quite a lot, and same, you are in a kind of morass of, oh God, what happens in the middle? I think it might be a screenwriting concept. I think I possibly picked it up when I was like a teenager of reading books like Save the Cat, and they're kind of like very formulaic ones for screenwriting don't necessarily translate into novels very well, but the whole thing of you had one goal throughout the whole plot and now something massive has happened and now you realize you have a totally other set of goals to deal with can fit quite nicely in the middle and can sort of stop you going one track and suddenly kind of induce a burst of energy in a slightly different direction. But yeah, Elizabeth, do you use midpoints as that?
Not too much. I think because I do write an outline, like I have a good idea of what goes on in the middle. So I don't use turning points too much. Just try it though.
I'm always envious of people who can do outlines though, because I think it's really a good skill. It seems like, to not be terrified at any point. That's, I think, the downfall of being a pantser for me anyways. At some point you are always terrified, right?
And I also wonder if like the turning points and midpoints, I think that's maybe more of a Western thing too. Then, like stories are told differently in different places. It's definitely in Save the Cat. I read that book not that long ago, and it is like a screenwriting thing with the midpoint. But I do think it's interesting that like you're beginning to the middle, but not really what happens after that. So you could like write yourself to that point and then figure it out. That's really interesting to me. And so my next question has to do with emotions too. So like you're building up the stakes, which, probably get higher and higher as the book goes along. And so how do you sort of write that emotional track to match the stakes? And what like writing tools do you use to help the readers feel those emotions as they're going along? Whoever wants to answer.
Okay, I will do this. For me, it's generally I have sort of a skeleton of the emotional journey that I want, and then I actually fix it in edits. So my books are real action heavy. Like a lot of things are going on. I mean, high stakes, high emotions. My first drafts are high stakes and some emotions. But the emotional arc that I'm going for is not always fully fleshed out in my first draft. So I will do as well as I can, and then send it to my editor. And she is amazing. And she's like, you really need to put some work here and do some work here. And she will point out places where I know that there needs to be work, but sometimes you're too close to your own work to see it. And so having somebody else come in and be like, yeah, you need to fill in some story here and some emotional here so that you are taking the reader on that thing, and then either like breaking their heart before you resolve it, because HEA is what I do. I write romance. But yeah, you want the reader to believe in the emotions as well. And sometimes my emotional arc can look more like a plane and then a mountain in my first drafts. So it's something that I generally add in my second drafts.
I just piggyback onto that because I have a very similar experience, and I've always thought of it being coming from science fiction fantasy as a kid. That's mostly what I read, and so as I'm writing a first draft, that's this whatever the sci-fi or fantasy plot is that kind of takes over my brain space, and like keeping the suspense and the tension of the story. And I know what the major points of the emotional journey are, but again, like my agent or my agent's assistant, when they look at it, it'll be kind of like, okay, this is great, but all of a sudden now they're like going into the bedroom and I'm not sure that they are really together yet. It's like, okay, now it's time to go back and add in those points and, layer and enrich, and yeah.
Yeah, I think I might have the opposite problem. I've been told I sometimes have too much interiority. Yeah, my characters are liable to sit around thinking about their emotions and the other person's emotions and their misunderstanding of the other person's emotions, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think I found one thing I find quite useful is that most people are not particularly honest with themselves about their emotions. And I found that quite useful to create kind of believable emotions in a character. Like they turn up to, I don't know, they turn up to an event maybe where the other love interest isn't there, and they think to themselves and to the reader, this is fine that they're not there. This will be great. I can handle this. And they go on thinking this until it becomes really, really obvious that actually they're overwhelmed. They wish the other person was here. Like, this is a huge problem, but they haven't ever actually said that in their narration. And I found that kind of like, not really unreliable narrator, but just lying to themselves the same way we all lie to ourselves, to be quite helpful. Yeah.
I think I only have a broad idea of the emotional journey for my characters when I first start beginning. And actually, I was thinking about this question a lot after you asked it, because I haven't really pondered it too deeply. But I think that as the author, since most of my books have been through the viewpoint of one character, I feel like as the author, I'm growing with that character, and that character is often driving like everything in the story. So like my reactions are her reactions, and that's how our journey progresses throughout the end of the book. So it's actually pretty different because I don't outline the emotional journey, whereas I do outline the plot. And so that's what I'm constantly discovering as I write.
And that's really cool. And that was going to be another question, is like, do you do like character arc outlines, or like, do you process that emotional journey ahead of time, or is that something you discover as you write? So Elizabeth just answered that. What about the rest of you?
That's a good question. I think I can feel if it's not working. Like the same way as I will also write up to the middle and then not know what's going on. Like I might know what they feel up to the middle and not know the second half. But the same way as you can feel if the plot is not working, you can feel if their emotional journey doesn't have a destination. And I don't know, I just kind of poked it until it falls into place.
At one point I started doing, early on in my writing career, I started doing character profiles. I use like OneNote and drag in photos and all that kind of stuff. And once I started doing that, this saved me a lot of grief, especially being a pantser. When in those profiles, I talk about like what it is, what's their thing, what's their Achilles heel, from their past, what's their damage, what's their baggage, and then how that relates to this relationship and how that's going to create problems and tension in this potential relationship and how that may keep the two apart. So I definitely do put thought into that ahead of time, only because I find it easier to, if I've got that to hold on to as I go into writing a relationship part of the story.
That would be a really good idea. I don't do that. I should do that. I should take notes. Much like my plots, I don't know everything that's going to happen. Generally speaking, in romance, there's the bleak moment where everything looks like it's lost, and I don't know what that is when I start. So I have two people. I'm trying to get them together, and I just hope as I'm writing the high stakes science fiction part of it, that they sort of fall into line and their emotional journey will go with it. And sometimes I do find myself in the middle going, why won't you just get together? but it is something that I have to work at, and it's not something that I start knowing. So I do explore as I write, and hope. So far it's always turned out okay. But it is something that is sort of explore as I go.
Cool. And this is Romance Day, so I do want to talk a bit about the romance in your books as well. And my main question is chemistry, because you all do chemistry very well. So my question is like, how like how do you get this like really great chemistry? And like, in your opinion, what makes good chemistry between your lead characters? And then like, how do you make that chemistry possible when you write?
I don't know.
Like, that's great. Good answer.
I think the real answer is read a lot of romance. Like, if you want to write romance, read a lot of romance, because you sort of internalize the beats and the emotions and like the whole journey. But if you're not reading romance, that's a lot harder to do. Like, it's a lot harder to just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a romance, and I have never read a single romance. Like, that's, you're setting yourself up for a bad time if you try that. So yeah, it's read a lot of romance, see what kind of romance you like, because there's a million different genres of romance out there. And they all have slightly different, emotional journeys and slightly different chemistry. And so read a lot of romance and then write something that you enjoy. So that's how I do it. Maybe, hopefully, one of these other amazing authors has, something I can learn from, but that's how I do it.
I remember some of my favorite stories when I read, especially as a teen, were the ones that gave me these like warm, fuzzy feelings about the romance when I was finished. And so that's what I always aim to do with the romance in most of my books. So I don't really know how I do it. I don't even know if it succeeds when readers write it, but that's like what I aim for.
Gosh, I'm trying to think. So for me, there's always this thing of one character is very impressed by the other character. So it's a case of looking at that character and thinking, what about them is amazing? What do they walk in the room and they go, like, this thing you are doing is really impressive to me, particularly because of my life circumstance. Like, not everyone is going to fall in love with this character, but the other character does. I think it's something like parts of the world are locked off to both characters. Different parts of the world are locked off to them, different parts of their brain are locked off to them, and the other character has the key. So things that are very difficult for one character may be very easy for the other, and they may not think about it at all. And the first character is looking at them and going, how do you do that? How is that so easy? And the other character wants to share, and they want to kind of open up parts of the world that the other character hasn't ever experienced or haven't ever experienced. Could be fun or easy. So it's something around that, I think.
I don't know. It's kind of like this crazy, like alchemy kind of magical. For me, it's. I think a lot of it when I'm writing, and especially when I'm planning stories, I'm a super visual person when it comes to creativity, and I spend tons of time on Pinterest, and I can't start a story unless I know what my characters look like, and I never just make up what they look like. I go find somebody on Pinterest that kind of fits for me, and a lot of times it's an actor or somebody that I have some connection with through movies or something, and as I'm writing, I do put myself in the heroine's seat. Like, if I don't feel it, I feel like nobody else is going to feel it, right? So when I'm writing their progression, towards each other, is it ticking my boxes? Am I getting into the hero, And I try to, that's just how it works for me. And maybe that's not super like educated way of doing it, but I just kind of go by feel and I look at pictures, I look at landscapes, and I think about these people in these landscapes, and a lot of it's kind of a movie in my brain.
I like that, because you go by like aesthetic is what it sounds like, right? Like, you're looking for the aesthetic of your book, and then that like helps set the mood, and then you can like go from there, which is really cool. And as a reader, I can say that for me, and all of you do this well, is detail. And like the details of it is kind of what sets up the chemistry. So like that small touch of the arm, or like whatever, it's those small details that you're like, oh yeah, I see what, like that's my favorite part. Or like the small little, the hand on the small of your back, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff is what I like, and what builds the chemistry for me. And so this is, I think, an interesting question. Y'all could, if you don't want to answer this is fine. But I find that romance and sci-fi fantasy are both genres that are really good for challenging societal beliefs and the patriarchy and things like that. So I'm just wondering how you think, or how do you use these genres to sort of challenge what traditional romance is in society? Because you all do it. I just don't know if you're like have a conscious answer to this. It's okay if you don't. But I think it's cool because people don't, people are always like, oh, romance, sci-fi, these genres are trash, they're escapism, like whatever. And they're not. Like, there's so much more to them, and they can, I think, challenge society and like show better ways of living. And so I don't know. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on that whole thing, whatever they might be.
Yeah, so if no one minds, I'll jump in because I have some thoughts on obviously the queer aspect, because I am gay. I am in a relationship with a woman. I am very fortunate to live in a time and place where this is not, career ending or dangerous in particular ways. Obviously it's not, but obviously it's not, societally accepted in the same way that heterosexual relationships currently are. So for me, this was a fairly easy one in that I could start with what is basically a fantasy world, in which it doesn't matter what gender you are or what your sexuality is. And nothing of that is kind of gone into in the story because there isn't a problem in this particular society with any of that. And the society itself is not a utopia in any way, shape or form, but this one particular problem does not exist. And that's literally me going, I would like to, I'm going to spend 12 months writing this, another 6 months editing it. It would be great to spend all that time in a world where like homophobia doesn't exist. And you just get to do that. And that, in some ways, it is, I suppose, challenging in that we, there are many writers out there now creating these queer norm worlds. Like, I'm certainly not the only one. But I think it doesn't grapple with queerness, with homophobia in the way that some other books do. And I think you need both. I think you need the books that make you think very deeply about it, that make you feel uncomfortable. But I also think we need some kind of escapism. And I think queer people want that as much as anyone else. So we've got a kind of a little space where we can just be queer and there's no problem. So yeah, that's.
I appreciate that as a queer person as well. Like, I do want to see books where it's just not a thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it just, again, like these genres can show this, that like, it doesn't have to be a thing. And it's just about like the joyfulness of it. And you can just be together and, it's lovely. And I like that more, to me personally, than things that grapple with, which we need the things that grapple with these issues. But as a queer person who has been grappling with these issues, I want to read the escapist stuff,
Sometimes just like, it's my night off.
Exactly. So what about any of the rest of you?
One thing I guess I could say about that, I think for me, something I've enjoyed, especially in writing the historical fantasies, this most recent series, and I didn't really set out to do this, but I found in each one that kind of a theme that I have is the heroine saves the hero at some point in the story every time. And it's not something I plan on, but I do bring in heroines that have a certain expertise that the hero doesn't have, or a certain strength, or they come from some position where they have something to contribute. And I've enjoyed writing historicals where the couple they're working together towards something. They're trying to discover a problem or, get through danger, and they become equal. They don't necessarily start out equal partners. And sometimes the heroes are a little bit resistant. Like my job is to protect you, or I can't let you do this. And they, I enjoy writing heroines that are like, you don't really have a choice, in that time period. So that's been fun for me.
I think I was more conscious of the issues in my previous series. Like in Spin the Dawn, the main character Maya is a seamstress in a world where people who tailors can only really be men, and so she challenges this idea. And in the romance part, I was very conscious of wanting to have a romantic interest who is very supportive of her. And I think that in even in Six Crimson Cranes, like I've wanted to normalize love interests who like don't necessarily try to be more macho or better than the protagonist, but that are just like supportive of them and like are just they're just there, and they don't necessarily have to be like equals at everything, but they're just like equal in love, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I do as well. Like my male main characters are very supportive, generally speaking. Like I don't generally read the kind of alpha hole books and I don't write them. Like my male main characters are generally, they're not trying to one up my female main characters. They're just trying to, they recognize someone who has her own strengths. And so, and in my world, like it's often the case that my female main characters will rescue the male main characters at some point, kind of like Sharon was saying. And so I enjoy writing it. I didn't set out to grapple with any of, society's issues or whatever. I just wrote a book that I wanted to read. And I also wrote a book where some of the things that I see that are problematic in the world don't exist, and some of them do exist, and my main characters are trying to fight against them. But I didn't really set out to do that. That's just kind of what came out of my brain.
Yeah, and that's what I love about, for sure sci-fi fantasy, but romance, particularly as a genre, has really been historically empowering for women, for sure. And also I'm a non-binary person. So to be able to see different types of people in relationships, and to be like breaking the barriers of, like y'all are saying, like, these men characters and what they can be, and, just different people. That's what I love so much about romance, is that it's so wide and there's so many different things, and you can read about so many different people, and it makes me really happy. So I'm such an advocate for genre fiction in general, but particularly for sci-fi fantasy and romance. So I am really enjoying, because y'all put these things together and it makes me very happy. We do have a question from the audience, so I will throw this one out there. So the question is, do you have a favorite book or series that you look to as an example of balancing plot stakes with relationship stakes?
Yeah, so one comes to mind for me. As nobody who has read my book will be surprised, I am a big fan of Louis McMaster Bujold and the Vorkosigan Saga, which is not strictly it's not a romance series, it's a science fiction series. But there is a kind of, it's a long series. It's been going since the 80s. It's really, really good. Highly recommend it. There's a kind of pinnacle of 3 books in the middle of it: Memory, Kamar, and A Civil Campaign, in which the main character respectively grows up. I mean, he's been in his 20s for several books, but this is the one where he grows up. He meets the love interest, and he tries to convince the love interest to marry him. And in the middle, he has like a secret society plot against his government. He has terrorist attacks, and then the third one is kind of a rom-com. But it's this thing of, we are in the middle of a very high stakes plot, and I am falling in love with you, and this is the worst possible thing I could be doing this time, which kind of reminds me of Jessie's books in some ways. But it's very much that balance of these incredibly strong characters are kind of shining through the plot. Like the plot is happening, but actually what you really care about is that these two characters get together. So yeah, for Costigan Saga, highly recommend it.
I think Elona Andrews' Hidden Legacy series does this really well. It's a romance, but it's kind of told over 3 books, so it's not like a standalone. Like the main characters are told over 3 books, so you get sort of a 3-book arc to get to the HEA. But I think Elona Andrews does a really good job of really punching you with emotions while the world is ending as well. So I think that if you're looking for something that's really going to like grab your emotions and also there's just amazing action going, that's the series that I would look at.
I've always been a really huge fan of Juliet Marillier's books, and she often has romance in her stories. She just has this really great folkloric voice, and my favorite series was the Seven Waters series, which I read a super long time ago and really need to reread, but the first book is based on the same fairy tale that Six Crimson Cranes is a reimagining of, The Wild Swans, and she just does a great job with like weaving romance with this incredibly high stakes journey that the main character has to go through. So I always recommend her books.
I think I'm gonna go with Outlander, just because for me, and I think in my books, I do a lot of world building and I like kind of atmosphere and I like historical components, and I love, and I think I only write, if I'm remembering correctly, slow burn. I love slow burn romance, and I love a slow build up through, getting into the world, feeling comfortable in the world, feeling the richness of the world, and just kind of moving slowly into that next stage. And I like stories that are a good solid half science fiction and fantasy speculative in some way, and a good solid half of, romance, and then hopefully merge together gracefully. So yeah, that one was a big inspiration for me.
And I'm going to plug one of my favorite authors, Charlie Jane Anders, who I think does this really well. All the Birds in the Sky is one of my favorite books of all time. And that book does such a good job of the stakes and the romance and the emotions and just making you want to ponder life. I love that book. And I think like a lot of the things that she writes, her newest one, Victory's Greater Than Death, is YA, but does that as well, where, there is a romance, but also these stakes going on and, just balancing that really well. So I know that I'm not an author on the panel, but I am a bookseller and I love these things. So I'm going to throw my rec out there as well.
Absolutely.
So that looked like that was the only question we had from the audience. So I'll keep asking some that I had. I want y'all to talk about process a little bit here as well, because I love like looking behind the scenes at authors' processes. So tell us a little bit about like your writing ritual, or like what do you do when you like sit down to write, and how do you like, I don't know, just go about creating story? Like what are the things that you do to help your creativity and to get going with creating a new story? It could be nothing. That's fine. But, some authors just like, I don't know, just sit at the desk and write. That's fine. But some authors have like sort of elaborate rituals. So I'm always curious.
I can go. I don't have anything. Sorry, sure. Go ahead. Sorry. I don't have anything very elaborate. To me, it's just getting in the right headspace. So I usually have, cliche, but coffee, tea, whatever, something to kind of, I don't know why, but that kind of gets my brain, caffeine, I guess, this kind of gets my brain going. When I'm just getting started and I'm trying to be inspired, again, visuals, whether it's, looking at images on Pinterest, doing research, even when I sit down to write, just doing little bits of research about what I'm just about to write, just to really to get myself into the world and kind of into the right space. And yeah, there's always I mean, pretty much every time there's always the first hour where I'm like, oh, let me go see like if anybody liked my Instagram post or, you know, things like that. And that it will generally kind of, hopefully kind of like taper off, you know, through the session until I can really get in and get immersed in it.
Oh, Sharon, how long are your sessions? Because you say the first hour, like that's most of my sessions.
Oh, it widely. I mean, I have two daughters, and they're both teenagers, and it widely varies how long the sessions are. But I'd say I try to do minimum of 2 to 3 hours, and then maximum of like, I can't really do it for more than 5 or 6. When I get close to the end, like I'm writing a new book now, and I'm really close to the end. So now I just want everybody to leave me alone. I want to write for 10 hours until I get done.
Yeah, no, I was laughing at the start because I'm at the kind of last stages of the book, but I've just lost my ability to concentrate completely.
Oh,
when
no.
you're in the last stage of the book, that the kind of you're panicking, this was not good, and I know that this always happens to me. It's always the kind of 80% mark. And because I haven't got the ability to concentrate, it's just a battle with myself the entire time. And I think probably a lot of people in the last year have probably got to this point. But every time you sit down, you want to do something else. And even if you sit there, you will just sort of start picking at things on the desk. Like even if you put all distractions away, you will just stare at the wall. But yeah, I found I have to kind of, so I have to vaguely know where I'm going. So I need to have plotted at least the next kind of couple of chapters. And if I don't have a plot for that, I just have to stop everything and like lie on my back on the floor, staring at the ceiling and go for long walks until I have some kind of bullet points. And then it's just a case of what has to happen to get to the next bit. And you just break it down to smaller and smaller and smaller chunks until you've got kind of 2 or 3 kind of micro bullet points for the next like 3 paragraphs. And then you just have to keep turning yourself around and putting yourself back in the chair until you've done that bullet point. And it just has to happen like 50 times a day. And I have a day job, so this is always happening, in the mornings or in the evenings, and there are multiple things that you have distractions of, and it just has to be, this is the top priority, and you need to just sit down and try again and try again and try again. Which, I mean, if you are inspired, that's fantastic. Sometimes you are just not inspired, and it just like chipping away.
Honestly, I think my background as a musician has helped me a lot with my concentration and focus. I grew up like practicing piano and writing music like almost every day, and like having lots of deadlines that I had to fulfill. So I think that's not so different as a writer. So I don't have any rituals or anything. I just get my butt in the chair and I just write as long as I can, because I have 2 very young daughters. And so I just I have to do it. And yeah, it's tough focusing sometimes, but I often I rely on like having little bits that I prepare the day before that I tell myself I'm going to work on tomorrow. And I think that helps me really get into the mood early and be excited to have something to fix the next day.
Yeah, I start when I'm starting world building, I do kind of the same thing as Sharon does, and I look for photos of my main characters. So I could spend a really long time on stock photo sites not writing, but that sort of helps like ground my main characters. And then when I write descriptions of them, I can actually look at a photo so that their eye color hopefully doesn't change like 9 times in the book, which it used to before I did this. And then my husband works from home now from the pandemic, and he sits at a desk like right next to me. And so he works kind of a standard 9 to 5. So I kind of work a standard 9 to 5 as well. The morning is generally spent doing admin-y things like social media, promotion, responding to emails, copy edits, like all the things of an author that's not actually writing, but it still needs to be done. And then the afternoons, I actually try and write. I write in a program called Scrivener, which keeps track of your word count and your scenes and chapters. It's super nice if you are considering writing. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But you can put in Scrivener your manuscript total count and the due date, and it will automatically calculate how many words you have to write that day. And if you don't write that many words, it goes up the next day. So I spend a lot of time with slowly incrementing word counts until we get into like the last 2 months when the panic sets in. And then Then I write a lot really fast. So generally I start out writing really slowly as I'm figuring out the world, I'm figuring out the relationship, I'm figuring out the plot. Everything just goes slowly at the beginning. And I'm a slow writer to begin with. So it's like glacial ice creep happening in my word count until the end, when all the words happen, because it's that or not turn the book in, and my editor will be like, you promised me the book, where is it? I also use a program, or I guess it's a website. It's a website and an app called brain.fm. It creates sort of a background noise that they make all sorts of claims about how it's supposed to help focus and whatever. I don't know anything about the claims, but it does actually help me get in the writing like headspace. And it helps block out, like, if my husband's on meetings or, you know, the lawnmower is going or whatever. It just sort of, that and these noise canceling headphones sort of block out the rest of the world so that I can dive into writing. So that's my process. It's not super processy, but I do try and write in the afternoons most days of the week. When it becomes closer to deadline, I will be writing 7 days a week, because what are weekends when deadline is happening? But otherwise I try and take the weekends off, just like a standard job would be.
Cool. Yeah, I always find it so interesting how, you know, every author is totally different in their process and how they do it. And so it's just always so interesting to me that, you know, some authors really do have these elaborate like tea rituals. And I'm like, whoa, like this is so cool. And then other authors are like, I don't know, I just sit my butt in the chair. It's just, it's always fun to hear about how different authors do it, how the sausage is made, let's say. We do have another question from the audience. So for the pantsers, are you ever surprised at how things work out? And do you ever find a semi-planned ending doesn't happen? So do you ever find that even a semi-planned ending doesn't happen because you're pantsing it and then it becomes something totally different?
Yes, I'm surprised by things that happen. I'm often surprised by my subconscious, like something that I'll have set up in the beginning and then sort of forgotten about. Like my subconscious will be like, and then this happens. And I'm like, I set that up. How did I do that? That's amazing.
Yeah.
So yes, I am sometimes surprised. I don't often have semi-planned endings that don't go well, because I guess my subconscious is still, you know, turning around and we end up sort of where I'm going, but I am surprised how we get there sometimes.
I would agree with that too. That sensation is like one of those weird magical writing things when you made this thing in chapter 2, and then you're in like the second to the last chapter. It's like, I need that thing. It's a miracle. But it still surprises me every time, and I feel brilliant for a little bit. But the only thing I've ever had that I do tend to stick with my endings, because it's kind of part of my big vision for the story is, you know, I know where it's headed. But the only thing that's close to that is one time I wrote a book that had a bit of a love triangle in it, and I was 4 chapters in, and one here, the male protagonist, there were 2 male protagonists, and one of them, I was going to kill one of them off, and then all of a sudden they switched as to which was going to be the main male protagonist in my head. And it wasn't, I had planned it totally the other way. And then it was like the character took over in my mind. It was like, no, I'm going to tell you, this is how it's going to be. So that happened to me one time.
Wow, that's quite big.
It was big.
Yeah.
It was big.
Did you have to rewrite the whole thing then?
Well, I was only 3 or 4 chapters in.
Oh, okay. That's good, I guess.
Yeah. So I had to rewrite a little, but it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, I don't think when I said I was a plotter, I'm more of a kind of lights in the headlight plotter that I can see up to like my midpoint, or I can see up to like, I tend to think in acts like the end of Act 4 or whatever. So often I don't know what's going to happen in Act 5, and I have to sit at the end of Act 4 and be like, okay, now what does happen in Act 5? So I guess in some ways, and then sometimes, you know, the whole last kind of 20,000 words are going in the wrong direction, and I've had to cut them out and do something else. So I guess, yes, I have scrapped bits, not even before I've reached the end, like in the middle, being like, no, none of this is going to work. So yeah, no, it does happen.
And Elizabeth, as a heavy outline, well, not heavy, but as an outliner, more outlining than pantsing, does the ending ever change? Like you outline it. So when you're writing, does it ever change?
It's changed once. Yeah. So my process isn't the same for every single book. It's mostly the same, but like I do allow for variance.
I know. I feel like it's got to be like writing a book has to be like, I don't know if y'all are big nerds like me, but the TV show Loki, where there's like all these different timelines sort of like branching off, and you have all these different variants of like the same thing. And then it's like, which one do I want to go with? I think about it that way a lot. It's like, I'll be reading a book and I'll be like, this could have gone so many different ways. I wonder if the author just had a way that it was going to go, or if they were like, we could go this way, and then made a choice. And it could be either way, but I don't know. I'm such a nerd. When I read stuff, I think about that kind of thing. Okay, so it looks like we have about 10-ish minutes left. If y'all have questions, please put them in the ask a question at the bottom. I real quick want to do a fun sort of lightning round. So I have like a few sort of bullet points that I want like sort of quick answer, like off the top of your head answers for. And I did warn the authors about this and gave them examples of what might be coming. So I'm not just like tossing this to them, but it's this is really fun. And have fun. Don't put too much pressure. If you can't think of something, just be like, pass, and we'll go on. It's fine. Okay. So love triangle and we'll start with Everina is in my top left. So we'll go Everina. It will be first here. So love triangle or soulmates?
OT3. That's an answer, right?
Yes, it is.
Wait, what did she say? Or I couldn't hear.
Explain, Everina.
I'm now spoiling the lightning round concept. Sorry. I, as a lot of people know, used to be kind of fandom adjacent in the fanfic community. There is a acronym called OT3, which comes from one true pairing, but is actually So whenever I hear love triangle, I'm like, we can solve this another way. Come on.
Yes, we can. I'm there for you. I'm there for that too. Okay, Sharon.
Soulmates, I think. Soulmates.
Elizabeth.
Also soulmates.
Okay. Jessie.
Soulmates or the throuple. No triangles. You have to choose.
I love a good love triangle, but I also love it ending in a throuple. That's the best ending for a love triangle. Okay, your favorite romance trope?
Oh gosh, pining.
I don't know if this is a trope, but I really like it when they write letters to each other.
Oh.
Or mistaken identities. I love mistaken identities.
Oh, mistaken identities are good, yeah.
Enemies to lovers, I think it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. That's my favorite.
Forced proximity.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. There was a thing for Bookstore Romance Day. Another bookstore called Betty's Pages was doing a thing yesterday in their stories, and it was like this or that. And so it was forced proximity, or I forgot what the other thing was. Anyway, but I was like, for all of them, I was like, both, all of these things, whatever. Like all the tropes, just give me whatever. But in enemies to lovers, forced proximity, if both of those things are happening, I am just into it. That's like my favorite.
Yep, take my money.
Okay,
you're really gonna like Hunt the Stars. Just like quick plug for my next book.
Yes.
It's there.
Awesome. Okay, so what about SFF, your favorite sci-fi fantasy trope?
Oh gosh.
Or general, just what your favorite trope?
All of it. What do I like? Let's go back to 16-year-old me who really liked teenage girl discovering her powers. Let's go very, very basic.
I love found families. Give me anything with a found family in it. It is my favorite thing ever.
I'm with you on that one.
Oh, go ahead. Time travel, like in parallel worlds, both those.
This is tough. I'm going to say I like quest stories, actually. Yeah.
I especially like it when an author takes a quest story and puts a spin on it, to where it's not the same old like white guy meets an old wizard who gives him a thing. That's like Star Wars, it's Lord of the Rings, that's Harry Potter, like that's literally everything. So like if an author does something different but with that same thing, I'm so here for it. Do you have any, Jessie?
Found family is definitely one of my favorites. I do like a good quest as well that is sort of a twist. So yeah, I like them all. Really, is my problem. Like what you were
right?
saying with the choose one, I'm like, I'll just take them all. Just give them all to me.
Put them all the tropes in a book. Okay, so tell us a book you're just an evangelist for, that you tell everyone about.
This one's quite easy for me. So I've been plugging quite well. Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. I blurbed it, I read an early copy of it. It is about a young trans girl in Los Angeles. I think I'm not very good at American geography, I will admit, who plays the violin. And there's a violin teacher who has a deal with the devil. She has sent 6 souls of her pupils to hell, and Katrina is the 7th pupil. And despite that kind of quite dark sounding premise, it's a very light book. It's quite silly, it's very funny, it's got space captains in it, it's got donuts in it, it's got found family in it. I love it. I keep telling people about it. It's coming out in September, and until then I will just keep telling people about it.
You know, I don't know if I can think of a single book. I'm sure I will after we're all done with this question, but I've been talking a lot recently about River Solomon, because I feel like they don't necessarily have people don't know who they are, but their writing is quite touching and beautiful. They tackle some difficult subjects, but the stories and they're not romance stories, but they do have romantic elements in them, and I just have been very touched. And the writing is also the type of like deeply personal kind of a lot of world building writing that I like and just immediately connect with. So anyway, that's just what popped in my head.
I think my connection dropped for like a second, so I missed the latter half of the question. Could you repeat? Sorry.
Sure. It was just, what is a book that you're an evangelist for, that like you just are always telling people about?
Okay. Oh, let's see. There's too many.
There are too many.
Just off the top of my head, because I can't think of anything else, like this one's just like popping up for some reason. I really enjoyed Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Like I'd never read too much. I think it was Mexican mythology that she infuses into her book, and I just was like completely enthralled when I read it. And I liked the romance too, or the romantic elements.
I have 2. I mean, I have 20, but I have 2 really fast. A Prince on Paper by Alyssa Cole. It's a contemporary romance with a Playboy prince and an overlooked woman, but she turns those tropes kind of on their head a little bit. It's amazing. And then also Deal with the Devil by Kit Rocha. It's a dystopian, futuristic, but still incredibly hopeful book about a group of genetically altered super soldiers and a group of women, and how they kind of lure them into a trap, but also once again kind of turns that on its head. So both of those.
Awesome. I did type all of those books into the chat, so y'all can copy paste, put them on a list, whatever. They're all there if you're looking for them. And it looks like we have like maybe a minute left. So in our last minute, can you tell everyone who is watching what you're working on, what's next for you? Do you have any books coming up? Plug your stuff, and then where people can find you if they want to go look up more. Everina.
Cool. So I have another book in the Winter's Orbit universe, but different planet, different characters, and it's probably easiest to find me at Everina Maxwell on Instagram.
Great. Sharon.
I have the third book in my series coming out called The Warrior Poet in October 12th, and it's packed with like Halloween, Samhain goodness. So it's perfect for that month. I'm so happy it worked out that way. You can find me at my website, but it's much more interesting on Instagram because I do a lot of photography of my farm and nature and witchy stuff. I'm working on a witchy book right now. That's what I'm about to finish. I'm so excited.
Super into witches right now, especially witchy romance. So I'm into it. Elizabeth.
I'm working on the sequel for Six Crimson Cranes, about to announce the title in a few days or weeks, and also on a new Disney book based on Pinocchio. I'm probably easiest to find me on Instagram. I'm at Olympics, which is kind of a play on Olympics, and I'm also on TikTok now under Elizabeth Lynn Writer.
TikTok, yay. Okay, Jessie.
I have a new book coming out in February, starting a new trilogy. It's called Hunt the Stars. You can find me on my website at jessiemihalik.com, or I'm on Twitter at Jessie Mihalik.
Awesome. And that you said that was enemies to lovers and forced proximity, and I am like super excited.
It is enemies to lovers. It's forced proximity. It's found family. Like I put all the tropey goodness in there.
Yay. Well, thank y'all so much for doing this panel. This was so amazing, and I'm so glad I got the chance to talk to y'all. Thank you everyone for watching.
Yes.
Have a great rest of your bookstore.